Hello everyone, I'm excited today to have Claire Jennison with us from Penning and Planning, and Claire is a proofreader amongst other things. So great to have you here, Claire, and so what's proofreading?
Oh, thank you for having me, Joanna. Thank you for inviting me. I feel very privileged to be on your Facebook group. Yeah, as you said, I'm a proofreader amongst other things, and I was thinking about this question when you kindly gave me a bit of a heads up before this, what you were going to ask. And as I am a writer, a bit of a storyteller, I've got an analogy for what proofreading is. And I like to liken it to writing a book is like building a house. You create something from nothing and then it appears and you know, you're very proud. Proofreading to me is like the bits in the house that you do last. So it might be cleaning the windows or setting your ornaments out or mopping your floors. It's like it's the final bits to make it just as perfect as it can be, without changing anything fundamental, like the colours of the walls or knocking down, you know, new roof or knocking down walls. So proofreading is the final bit before you publish, or sometimes before you have your book formatted, depending on which route you're going down. So it's, as we're humans, nothing is ever perfect. Even in traditional publishing, you still get the odd typo or maybe the odd full stop missing from a published text. But a proofreader's job is to get it as perfect as possible so that readers aren't distracted by anything that's not quite right.
Brilliant analogy. So if we're all writers, we might not all be writing books, but obviously we're writing day in, day out. So can anybody proofread, or is it a skill we have to learn? Do we have to go on a course, or what do you think? Can we all do it?
There are definitely ways to help yourself proof your own work, but I mean, as a writer myself, I outsource my own proofreading because you're very close to your own work. When I'm proofing other people's work, I have like systems in place that I've learned through training, and because I, luckily for my profession, which is no accident, I'm very like detail orientated anyway. I'm very kind of like nitpicky about a lot of things, words especially. So in theory, yes, anybody can become a proofreader, but that doesn't mean that everybody is going to be good at it. You definitely need to invest in professional training and ongoing, continuous professional development, but there are certain things you can do to help yourself. For example, I find like reading the text aloud often helps, because then you're reading what's there and not what your brain or eyes kind of fill in, or if maybe it has been duplicated, your brain will just see the one, whereas if you read it aloud, you'll notice the mistake. So I either read it aloud myself or use the read aloud function on my laptop. That's really helpful as well. So that's just one tip that people can do for themselves, but there is no, if you're going to pay someone to proofread your work, they really do need to have been trained and invested in training courses and be able to prove their skills.
And so how does proofreading differ from editing? I'm sure that's something that people probably think it's interchangeable, but I'm guessing it isn't.
No. I love editing. That's the favourite part of my job. Going back to the house analogy, editing is you wouldn't like maybe knock down walls or re-roof or get a new kitchen. That's kind of like fundamentally changing the book. You might even just get a new carpet where you just do a little bit of something just to improve it. Whereas proofreading, like I said, is the final kind of like showmanship of it. But no, editing is much more intensive, and much more subjective, I suppose. Like I write fiction and non-fiction, but I specialise in fiction, crime fiction. I'm obsessed. So like I'm very familiar with the tropes and the conventions and, you know, the reader expectations of crime fiction, for example. So I would be a good person to edit a crime fiction book, because I know what's meant to be there, really. Another editor could do an excellent job of editing the sentence structure, or suggesting paragraph rearrangement, for example, but they might not be a specialist in that field. But that doesn't mean that the specialists will necessarily do a better job than the other one, because it's subjective. It's what the author wants their book to be. And obviously, when you edit and you get feedback from the author about what they thought about the edit, it's still their decision whether to accept those edits or not. So editing it's tweaking, it's rearranging, it's refining, it's looking at flow, characterization, world building, consistency, especially throughout the book. You'd be amazed at how many people aren't consistent in their books, and, you know, fair enough, because they don't think about that when they're writing it. That is my job as an editor, to pick that up. For example, in a non-fiction, they may use the percent sign in the beginning and then later write it as percent, or they might mix digits and numbers when they're writing work, when they're talking about ages, like 10 years old, 10 years old. Those kind of things, it's got to be consistent throughout the book. So editing is a lot about consistency. And everything else I mentioned, it's really quite an intensive process, but so rewarding.
So you clearly enjoy it. You're very passionate about your editing.
Oh, love it so much, yeah.
How did you become an editor then? What did you have to do?
Well, I've always been a writer, so I've always like tinkered with words, and I've always been fascinated with like etymology, the origin of words, and I taught English and English literature for over 12 years, so I'm a qualified English teacher. And when I left teaching in 2017, I was at a bit of a crossroads, really. It's one of those kind of stories where you're like, well, what do I really want to do with my life? I had a lot of changes were happening in my personal life, and I reflected a lot on what I would like to do in the future. I wasn't enjoying teaching as much as I did originally. It was taking up a lot of time, and I loved the topic still, and I always will. And I thought, well, what do I love above all else? And it was writing and reading, and working with words. So I invested in editing and proofreading training courses, and kind of any craft books I can get my hands on, and podcast galore. I'm a daily podcast listener to author podcasts, writing podcasts, editing podcasts, anything in the field. I got myself on LinkedIn and got a really handy network of other editors and proofreaders and writers. I joined a writing group and built a network of writers around me, and I just immersed myself in it for months and months and months before I even actually like started the business. It was all sort of working away in the background, and then I got to a point where I thought, well, it's now or never. You know, I've done all this preparation. It's terrifying, but I'm going to go for it, and so I went for it. So July 2018 was when I launched the business, and since then I've invested in more training courses and my own personal education with regards to editing, proofreading, and now formatting, which is another service I offer. And it's kind of it's kind of brought back my oomph a little bit that I lost when I was teaching.
No, you're clearly very passionate about it. It really shines through.
Oh, thanks.
So how are you finding then authors? Do you think that more people are getting into the notion of writing books? I mean, you know, it's easier to self-publish these days, isn't it? Has that helped? Are you seeing a growth in locally produced authors?
Yeah, definitely, I think so. I don't have any shortage of like author friends or author clients. So yeah, a lot of people are exploring self-publishing. Thankfully, I think the stigma between traditional publishing and self-publishing is starting to wane slightly, thankfully. I mean, I've never pursued a traditional publishing deal. It's just not something that I feel I need, but I do respect anybody who wants to just see where that route takes them. But also, I know a lot of hybrid authors that have been traditionally published and also self-publish, and vice versa. They began as self-published authors and then they got a publishing deal through having their books on Amazon. There were lots of success stories. So, I mean, like I said, I was a member of a writing group, and a lot of my writer friends there have self-published. I think it's important, though, to still understand that the quality of self-publishing still needs to be extremely high. It's not enough to just sort of write a book and think, oh, that'll do, and then, you know, bang it up on Amazon. That's not going to help the indie author industry by having like subpar products available, and that won't help the stigma between traditional and self-publishing. So that's where hopefully I come in helping authors publish to a very high standard, a standard that I publish myself, that I want for myself, that I want for all my author friends and all my author clients, is a high standard. So I think a lot of authors are realising that now, and it's not the easy option, and it's not cheap necessarily. You know, it's, yes, you can self-publish, you know, fairly for a reasonable price. But there are costs involved in editing, proofreading, formatting, cover design, promotion. Sometimes if people want to, you know, pay for advertising on Facebook or Amazon or sponsored posts, etc. There's a lot. But I think it's wonderful that so many people are embracing that these days. And I find it really exciting that people can take control of their own publishing career and author career. So yeah, I definitely see a lot of people self-publishing, and I celebrate every single person that does that. I think it's a wonderful achievement. So
if we're going to, we've got our manuscripts, so am I right in thinking that the first step would be for us as the author to go through and really try and have a good edit ourselves and get it as good as we can before we came to someone like yourself?
Definitely. I mean, I have developmentally edited manuscripts before where the author has like, I'm really stuck, I don't know what to do with this, like help me, and I've kind of taken it at quite a raw stage. But generally, I would encourage all authors to self-edit as much as possible. I have got loads of a series of self-edit blogs on my website actually, that I will give the link for later on. But yeah, it's important to go through, and like I talked about before about the consistency, you know, make sure your titles are all the same, make sure the same font is used throughout, you know, just the very basics, even just to make it as presentable as possible. Read it aloud, you know, even read it with a friend or your husband or your wife, or, you know, anybody that wants to help, just to get a good sense of the book. It's not enough to think, oh, that'll do, and then send it to an editor. You know, unless you are at the stage like my client was, where they wanted that intervention. But if that does happen, it will cost more because it's more work for the editor. So you will save yourself money potentially in the long run by learning how to self-edit it edit it yourself as an author, and it's really fun. I mean, some people don't like the editing bit. I do, obviously, but being able to sort of go through your own work objectively, it is essential for writers, I think. So it's you'll be doing yourself a favour by learning how to do, even at a just basic level. It will definitely help.
And if we're writing shorter articles, then say a blog or something like that, are there any kind of daily things that you see that we should be able to pick up ourselves? Any sort of classic faux pas that the average author makes?
What I see the most is misuse of capitals. So people like only proper nouns should be capitals. That's like names and places. Anything else, it can be confusing. This is where you do need a professional sometimes. If it's something that you don't want to deal with, or you can understand it. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, only proper nouns should be capitals, and obviously the start of sentences. Also, in fiction, what I see a lot is punctuation marks being used incorrectly. And there's a very specific way to set out your dialogue in fiction, which I've got a blog post about as well. That's, and also to be consistent with that, for example, using double speech marks for direct speech and single speech marks for reported speech, something writers might not ever think about, especially if you're writing just a chatty blog post and you're talking about what someone said. But yeah, there are UK and UK conventions for lots of things. So a lot of the time, it's just that authors, myself included a few years ago, I didn't know the differences between these things. It's only through training and researching and self-development that I've learned these things. But yeah, it's just that's a biggie. So the capitalisation, punctuation, and homophones. I mean, going back to being an English teacher, using the wrong your, or where, there. These can be easily Googled. So if you're unsure, just check. So yeah, they're the things I see the most common mistakes.
I think you're right. The one I see time and time again is people putting you when they mean your. And it's just taking that R off, which is probably just kind of speed, or they're not reading it through. But classic, so many times when they say, leave you name instead of leave your name, sort of thing. Yeah. And it's just those little things that really make a difference, don't they, to the quality of somebody's writing.
Definitely. I mean, and we are busy. We're all busy people, and the amount of content that business owners and writers put out into the world is immense. And so, we can be forgiven for sometimes mistyping, but that's where it's important to go back and check your work. You've just got to we all make mistakes, we all do, but you've really got to get into the habit of, I would never dream of writing a blog post and just publish. I've always go back and check it and tinker with it and just make sure that it's as good as I want it to be, because once it's out there, people will see it, and 100 people might see it with mistakes, and then they'll form an opinion of you based on those mistakes. And especially as in my profession, our profession, that's going to be a negative opinion. Oh, well, she can't even type a blog post. She's made a mistake in a blog post. That's not the impression we want to give. So think about as readers, when we see mistakes in traditionally published books, you think, oh, wow, that's been through maybe 12 stages of editing and proofreading. How can that have been missed? Things do get missed, but it distracts us as readers, and we do think negatively about it, whether that's fair, but it's true.
It is true, and it just shocked me still when I find a mistake in a proper book. You think, how on earth did that get missed? But it's surprising how often that does happen. So so brilliant tips, Claire. So tell us a little bit more about your business then, and how we can find out more about you.
Okay, so my website is www.penningandplanning.com. The email is the same, penningandplanning@gmail.com. I hang out mostly on LinkedIn. I'm there every day. I post every day in weekdays. But I'm on Instagram as well at Penning and Planning. And I offer editing, proofreading and formatting services. I do a little bit of ghostwriting here and there. Not as much as I'd like, but I do write my own books as well. So I keep piling more on myself. So yeah, so I would advise, if you have an editing or proofing inquiry, to get in touch sooner rather than later, because I do get booked up a couple of months in advance. But for formatting, I can accommodate much tighter timescales. I have got a couple of blogs up on my website, aforementioned, about formatting, if you're not sure about the differences between formatting and typesetting, because there are quite a few. So check those out if you've got any questions, or feel free to DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn if you want to know anything more. No question is a daft question. There are things we all don't know, and I'm still learning as I go, and I love to learn new things, so I'm always grateful for any information passed my way as well.
Brilliant. I will make sure all your details are in the group. And have you got another book in planning at the moment? Are you writing a book at the moment?
Yes. Well, it's been a long time in the making, because I keep getting distracted by all my clients' books. But yes, it's my first fiction novel. It's the first in a series of 3 psychological thrillers. It's called Twisted Motives. It's just come back from the beta readers with some very helpful and constructive feedback, so I'm very pleased about that. So I will be making those revisions in the next few weeks, and then I'm aiming, fingers crossed, for a publication date sort of end of September time is penciled in. It's nerve-wracking when it's your own work out there, but yeah, that's what I'm hoping, because I would really love to have my book alongside the array of author books on my website as well. I'd be really proud, and it's kind of like proving to myself I can do it as well, like all my author clients do. I'm in awe of anyone who just gets on and does it. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting time.
Excellent. Well, I'm on that journey with you. I've just finished my first novel manuscript, and it's out with beta readers as well. So
same stage.
We can see how we get on together, which is really exciting.
Oh, well, let me know. Let me know when it comes out, and I'll do some promos for you on social media.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sure we've all learned an awful lot about proofing and editing, and I'll put the details in the group so that we can come and find you and read all the blogs and the other information you've got on there. So thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Joanne. It's been lovely to talk to you.